July 1959. Prescott, Arizona, on the exhibition grounds at the edge of Courthouse Plaza, where Frontier Days has filled this town every July since 1888, and the smell of dust and livestock and fried dough in the July heat has been the smell of the first week of July in Yavapai County for longer than anyone in the grandstands can remember. A man in a leather exhibition vest is scanning the back rows of the crowd for the right volunteer. He finds the biggest man in the 6th row, a broad-shouldered fellow with a ranch hat pulled low, sitting with the patient stillness of someone who has been to a great many events and is not easily surprised. The man in the vest points. Here is the story. Roy Pell had been running fast draw exhibitions at rodeos and county fairs across Arizona, New Mexico, and the southern edge of Colorado since the fall of 1951, when he won the Southwestern Regional Fast Draw Championship for the 3rd consecutive year and decided the trophy circuit was not going to pay his rent and the exhibition circuit might. He had been right about that for most of 8 years. The work was not glamorous. A 2-ton truck pulling a trailer that held a 12 by 20 exhibition ring, a target frame and a set of steel plates he'd welded himself, a public address system he'd rebuilt twice from parts at a radio shop in Albuquerque, and a pattern developed over 1,100 shows that could make a crowd of 40 feel like an arena and a crowd of 400 feel like a conversation. He had been doing Prescott Frontier Days for 7 consecutive years. The week in Prescott was the anchor of his July, the show he built his summer around. The exhibition ring smelled of gun oil and leather and the particular alkaline smell of Arizona dust that settles into everything when you work outdoors in July. The steel target plates were worn bright at the center from the strikes, dulled at the edges where Roy stacked them. He kept his rigging harness in a canvas roll he'd stitched himself, the loops sized to his own hand, because he had long ago learned that fit was the difference between a clean draw and a bind that cost 3/10 of a second, and 3/10 of a second was the whole point. Roy's son Danny was 9 years old and traveled with him every summer, June through August, sleeping in the back of the truck between towns, eating at diners along US 89 and state roads Roy knew by the feel of the pavement and the distance between the grain elevators. Danny's mother had died in December of 1955, and after that summer had meant the circuit, and Roy had meant the circuit. And Danny had grown up knowing every fair in the Southwest by the sound of its crowds. He sold programs at the front of the ring before each show. After the show, he helped load the trailer, handling cable and stakes with the methodical care of a child who had been taught that equipment maintained is equipment that doesn't fail. And equipment that doesn't fail is what keeps the show running. On the morning of July 3, 1959, the Frontier Days fair director called Roy into his office trailer and told him the contract was not being renewed for the following year. The fair was going in a different direction. They'd booked a television personality for 1960, someone the younger crowd would recognize from the screen. The fair director said he hoped Roy understood. Roy thanked him for 7 good years, and meant it. He went back to his truck and sat for a few minutes with the windows down and the Prescott heat coming in off the plaza. And then he went to set up the ring, because the afternoon show started at 2. Have you ever known someone who was very good at something and kept showing up to do it with full attention on the kind of morning when most people would be forgiven for not showing up at all? Someone who struck the stakes and coiled the line and checked the target plates and put on the leather vest because the crowd was coming and the crowd deserved the whole show, not the diminished version of it. Some of you know exactly what Roy Pell looked like setting up that ring alone on a Thursday morning in July after the conversation with the fair director. Some of you have been that person. There were other performers on the Frontier Days bill that week. A trick roper from Flagstaff, a saddle bronc rider out of New Mexico, a barrel racing team. They knew Roy. They had been on the circuit with him at various points over the years, and they knew about the fair director's decision, because news like that travels fast on a small circuit. None of them said anything to Roy that morning that was particularly useful. You know what it is to be on the same road as someone, and to understand their situation, and to decide that it isn't your problem, and to go back to your own show. The circuit has that room in it the same as everywhere else. The room that knows what's right, and decides that the right thing is someone else's department. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your state in the comments. I want to know how far this one reaches. John Wayne was in Prescott that week because pre-production work on a picture he had been developing for 3 years had sent him to the Charlotte Hall Museum for conversations with a historian who knew the specific corner of territorial Arizona history Wayne needed to get right. He had been in Prescott for 2 days and had one more to go, and he had come to the Frontier Days grounds that Thursday afternoon. Because Frontier Days was the kind of thing he came to when it was available. Not to be seen, but because he genuinely liked the circuit. The specific texture of a Western fair, the smell of livestock and fried dough and hot aluminum bleacher seats in July. He had parked at the far end of the plaza lot and come in through the back of the grounds with the hat pulled low and his shoulders angled away from the foot traffic, the way he moved in public when he did not want to be the event. He was in the 6th row when Roy Pell scanned the crowd and pointed at him. He got up and came down to the ring and took off his hat for a moment and put it back on. The way a man does when he is buying himself a second to read a situation. And then he stepped up to the line. Roy ran his standard patter. "What's your name, partner?" Duke what?" "Just Duke." Roy winked at the crowd. Just Duke, from the 6th row, ladies and gentlemen." The crowd laughed. Wayne said he would do his best. The rules of the demonstration were simple. Both men draw from holster at the tone, firing at the target plate. The professional draws in under a third of a second. The volunteer draws in approximately whatever a man draws who has not spent 11 years on the mechanics of a clean, fast draw. Roy sets the tone generator. The tone sounds. Both men's hands go to the holster at the same instant, and the crowd is watching the big man in the ranch hat, because he is the entertainment. He is the one who is supposed to be slow and a little embarrassed about it. And he is neither slow nor embarrassed. His hand goes to the grip correctly. The draw clears the holster without binding. The wrist alignment on the extension is close to right. He is not fast. He is not fast by Roy Pell's measure, or by the measure of anyone who has competed at the regional level. But he is not the stumbling civilian Roy pulls from a county fair crowd. Roy beats him by 0.4 of a second. The steel plate rings. The crowd cheers. Roy stands and looks at this Duke. This big fellow in the ranch hat, who is grinning at the plate he didn't hit first, and who says nice draw the way someone says it, who means it, rather than as a consolation. Roy says, "Where'd you learn to do that?" The man says, "Pictures." Roy nods and assumes he means still photographs. He moves the show along. Wayne went back to the 6th row. He stayed for the rest of the show, the exhibition draws, the speed trials against the clock, the trick shots. He watched Roy work. He watched how Roy talked to the crowd, how he reset the target frame between rounds, the specific way he adjusted his grip before each draw, the way a musician checks tuning before each piece. After the crowd thinned, Roy and Danny worked the ring, loosening stakes, coiling cable, breaking down the target frame. The July heat had settled into the late afternoon, and the plaza was going quieter as the day show crowd moved toward the evening schedule. Wayne came around the outside of the ring to where Danny was winding cable. He crouched down and asked the boy about the winder, how it worked, what the correct tension was, How Danny knew when the coil was right. Danny showed him. Wayne listened the way people listen when they are actually interested and not performing interest. Roy came around from the far side of the ring and found them. Wayne stood up. He said, "Your boy knows his equipment." Roy said, "He should. He's been doing it since he could hold a coil." They talked for a while at the edge of the empty ring in the late afternoon. Wayne asked about the circuit, which shows Roy did, how the fair crowds had changed over the decade, whether the exhibition work was getting harder to book. Roy told him. He mentioned that the Prescott contract was ending. Wayne asked if Roy had done any technical work for film productions. Roy said he knew a man who had done some consulting work out of Tucson. He asked why. Wayne said, "Because every fast draw I've seen on screen is wrong. The grip is wrong, the wrist is wrong, and the timing is wrong. And nobody has gone and found someone who actually knows the mechanics before they film it. I've been in 20 fast draw scenes in my career, and I've done it wrong in every one of them, because nobody on the production knew how to tell me what right looked like." He said, "You'd be doing me a favor. I need someone who can show actors how to draw like they know what they're doing." Roy said he had never done anything like that. Wayne said, "The man who taught me to ride a horse before my first picture had never taught an actor either. He figured it out." He put a business card into Roy Pell's hand. He said to call the number and ask for his office, that they'd work out the terms, that the job would pay properly, and would start when the picture went into pre-production that fall. He said, "Tell them Duke sent you." He walked back through the grounds and was gone before Roy finished loading the trailer. Danny came around to the front of the truck and found his father standing in the empty parking area, looking at a card in his hand, with the expression of a man who is not certain the thing he is holding is real. Danny said, "What's that?" Roy handed him the card. Danny read it. He looked up at his father. He said, "Dad." That was John Wayne. Roy took the card back and read it again. It said, "John Wayne / Batjack Productions," and carried a Los Angeles telephone number. He sat down on the running board of the truck. He called from a payphone on Gurley Street the next morning. The woman who answered said, "Batjack Productions." "Mr. Wayne's office." Roy sat down on the sidewalk with the receiver in his hand and looked at the plaza for a moment before he could speak. He worked on 4 Wayne productions between 1960 and 1969 as a technical advisor on period firearms handling and fast draw. The work started at $225 a week. By 1965, it was $350. Between the 4 Batjack productions and 2 additional pictures he was referred to through Wayne's production contacts, Roy worked approximately 400 weeks of technical advising across 9 years at a mean rate of $275 a week. That is $110,000 before his continued summer exhibition income, which was now supplemented by a credentialing the circuit had not previously given him. Technical advisor on major westerns was a different category of name. Then Southwestern regional champion, and it opened different doors at different fairs. He never lost Prescott. The new fair director came to him in 1961. Danny Pell worked the summer circuit alongside his father through high school. He went to the University of Arizona on academic scholarship in 1968. He has worked in documentary film production for 30 years and says that what he knows about the discipline of craft work, doing a thing precisely right, maintaining equipment as if it matters, showing up with full attention on the days when showing up is hardest, came from watching his father set up the exhibition ring alone on the morning of July 3rd, 1959, after the conversation with the fair director, without complaint, because the crowd was coming. The photograph from the Prescott Frontier Days that afternoon. A fair photographer caught both men at the line at the moment of the draw. The big man in the ranch hat and Roy in his leather vest, both hands dropping simultaneously toward holster. Hung on the equipment table at every exhibition Roy ran until he retired in 1974. Danny has it framed in his office in Tucson. The hat is pulled low, and the angle of the light is wrong for an easy identification. But if you know to look, you can see the line of the jaw and the size of the hands, and the way the man carries his weight at the line. Roy always said you could tell everything about a man by how he stood when it was time to draw. If you find yourself in Prescott during Frontier Days in July, the Courthouse Plaza is the center of town, and the exhibition grounds run along the south side. They have been running Frontier Days on this plaza every July since 1888, which makes it the longest consecutive outdoor rodeo in the country, and which means that whatever happened on a specific Thursday in the summer of 1959 happened in a place with enough history behind it to hold the weight. Some of you know what it is to do excellent work in front of a crowd that doesn't fully understand what it's watching. Some of you have been on that circuit, not broken, not desperate, just very good at something that the world was in the process of deciding it needed less of. This one is for everyone who set up the ring anyway. John Wayne never mentioned being at the Prescott Frontier Days in July of 1959, not in any interview from that summer or after, not in any account of his pre-production work on the picture that sent him to the Charlotte Hall Museum that week. The fair photographer who took the draw photograph did not understand what he had captured until the following year, when he pulled the negative out and sat with it for a long time, and then put it away. The one person who told the story with exact specifics, the crowd, the draw, the cable winder, the card, the words about the grip and the wrist, was Roy Pell, who told it to Danny sitting in the truck cab on the fairgrounds parking lot on the evening of July 3rd, with the card in Roy's hand and the last of the July light coming in off Courthouse Plaza. Danny asked what his father was going to do. Roy looked at the card for a long time. He said, "Call the number. Do the job right." He did both. John Wayne never explained to Roy Pell why he had walked around to the back of the exhibition ring rather than returning to his car. He never explained why he had stopped to talk to the 9-year-old winding cable. He never explained the card. He did not explain himself. He lifted one hand at the end of conversations, easy and loose, the way a man acknowledges something he considers finished business, and left. If this story is worth keeping, pass it on to someone who would understand what it means. Subscribe so you don't miss the ones still coming. There are more of them, and they all deserve to be heard. And unfortunately, they don't make men like John Wayne anymore.